We are fully underway with the 2021 car launches, and today it was the turn of the team formerly known as Toro Rosso to launch their 2021 challenger, the AT02. And to cover off what we can learn from a 2-minute video and a couple of car studio shots, I'm joined by Johnny, Alex and JBL to go through the AlphaTauri launch from today. So let's start off, Jake, with you. Now, I know that you've got a personal bugbear with trying to do too much analysis from launch car trim, but what have you been able to pick up from the launch today in terms of the technical side of what AlphaTauri has brought to the table?
Well, I think first of all, my personal bugbear is just show the car. No one's going to copy it at this point. We're all going to see it in Bahrain anyway in a few weeks. But there are a few things you can see. There's a brand new floor, as with the regulations, but AlphaTauri has done something a little bit different to what we've seen. So you have that now tapered section where it fits into this triangular exclusion zone, but there's two little sort of lips sort of front next to the side pod and then a little bit further back as well, just before the rear tyre. And it's not something that we've seen too much detail of in launches or in practice, but what it seems to be is just that continuation of using that floor to just help expand airflow out the sides rather than straight out the diffuser. As we know, we're losing quite a lot of downforce from these new floors, so it seems to be a bit of a different way of trying to claw some of that back and do what the diffuser's doing just a little bit earlier on in the car. So yeah, it is very, very interesting design. If you look at it from the top-down shot that AlphaTauri provided, it doesn't always follow the sort of triangular way through. There's a little fin and then it sort of squares off a bit as well. So it's this interesting attention to detail, which maybe we'll see on other cars, I don't know. It is just interesting to see how the different teams are coming up with their own approaches to this new bodywork regulation. Jody Eggington released an interview of his thoughts on the car on the AlphaTauri website, and he said that AlphaTauri's tokens had gone into the nose. The nose crash structure requires 2 tokens to change, but the nose doesn't really look a whole lot different. So either we're expecting a new nose to come or in Bahrain, or it's just a purely internal thing, and maybe they're changing the weight or just sorting out the crash structure a little bit from a structural standpoint, if you like. But it does look very, very familiar, and part of me hopes that we'll see something a little bit new going down the road. There is also a little tweak to the barge wheel package as well. Over the years, AlphaTauri has been very, let's say, minimalist in their approach to the sort of sidepod turning vanes that we see, and they get more and more complex. But they've done a lot with a little. There are some sort of contemporary changes, a switch to that sort of Venetian blind style that we've seen from various other teams in terms of their deflectors. But again, we'll see how that changes down the road. The whole barge wheel package might be a little bit different going forward. And then just finally as well, a couple of other points of interest. Within an anomaly in the regulations, Toro Rosso could theoretically have switched to the 2020 Red Bull suspension because that wasn't something that they required a token to do, but there are knock-on effects to that, so they decided to stick with the Red Bull 2019 package that they used last season. Honda has provided an all-new power unit for them and for Red Bull to use before the newly formed Red Bull Powertrains takes over the technology for 2022 and beyond. So yeah, there's much carryover from the AT01 so far, at least in the launch renders, but again, as we said at the top, we expect some of that to change. So I kind of hope it does, so it gives me something to talk about on during testing week.
And obviously we've only seen McLaren to compare, but were there any kind of key differences that you noticed between the two approaches to this year's regs?
I think I mentioned the floor a little bit. I do think there's more to come from McLaren on that. I don't think they were entirely upfront about what they'll be doing for next season. But with McLaren, I think the key thing was that switch in packaging to the Mercedes powertrain. The Honda is packaged differently, and the Red Bull and the AlphaTauri has been managed to be packaged in the past very, very tightly, and that has continued. teams are going to try and package the rear of the car as much as they can to open up the floor a little bit, and that's so much more vital with these regulations as well. In terms of similarity as well, if AlphaTauri does turn up with a new nose and it would be like we expect, it would be slightly thinner, then that would be another trend that they would follow with, but we don't know if that will happen. I'm purely speculating on that point.
I guess in talking about comparisons with McLaren, the launch itself had a very different vibe from what we saw earlier in the week. John, what was your take on the launch itself? It was kind of my take was a little bit more. It was a little bit more concise. Is that the right word?
I think it's the most concise launch you can have without releasing a single photograph, because there was this big build up and then suddenly it all happened and it was all over. But I don't mind too much we tune in to see a new car launch and see the car. We don't tune in for a 25-minute show of playing Jenga or driving radio control cars or going to music studios or something. So I think there's a nice thing that you have a launch, here's the car, let's talk about the car and focus on that. So keep it simple, always the best way.
Now, there wasn't much in the way of changing in terms of the overall look and feel, but there was kind of key differences in the livery. What did you think of the look and feel of the AlphaTauri?
I've always quite liked the AlphaTauri livery, but I think Faenza has done some good liveries over the years. I think they've had a bit more freedom than Red Bull in some sense to do their own thing and become a bit different. So at Toro Rosso they had some great liveries. I liked last year's, I like this year's, but I don't think Alex agrees with me.
No, I know it might be a little bit controversial and a little bit convoluted, my argument, in terms of I applaud AlphaTauri for changing the livery. I think that's well done for doing it. The actual cars aren't changing much this year. The look's going to change. Well done. However, I don't like the changes that they've made. I really, really loved the look last year. And I just think the way they've done it, in terms of the way they've implemented pushing the white further down, just looks a little bit sort of cheap and sort of weirdly done. Like, you look at how it comes onto the rear wing, it just looks like it's been dipped in paint. And it reminds me of what Ferrari were doing a few years ago, where that lovely classic red livery was suddenly becoming sort of carbon black under this sort of ribbony approach. And I just don't like it. But also, the other thing is that I just do worry a little bit on how it's going to show up on TV for them. And I know I'm doing their sort of marketing things for them here, but Mercedes has got a black car, but it's kind of shiny and they're guaranteed TV time at the front, whereas this one going really, really dark, I just think not sure it's going to look very good on TV. There's a reason why all those Formula E and WEC teams ended up looking exactly the same in sort of red and white, because they knew it was going to show up wonderful on TV. So that's the reason why I don't like it. I know it's controversial. I do agree with you, John, that AlphaTauri Toro Rosso has had some amazing liveries, much better than Red Bull over the years, although I think in the early stages it was sort of just variations on a theme. But yeah, that's my 2 cents and a ridiculous argument on the livery.
No, do you know what? Because I thought it was the best looking car on the grid last year. I absolutely loved it. And I kind of said, I think I put on Twitter, like, if the designer touches the livery this year, I probably will riot. But I'm not mad at the new livery, but I think I'm going to side with Alex here and say, I don't know, it really worked for me. I love the fact that we had a kind of classic mainly white livery. It looked really classic, but a lot of people are saying that this livery reminds them of like late 2000 Williams, and people were kind of liking that. Like, from what I could see on Twitter, a lot of people were liking that. What do we think about that comparison? Are we getting that vibe?
I can understand that comparison, definitely. I just think the way it was just implemented slightly differently. I don't know, just the look of the way it flows onto the various parts of the car, the white bits on the AlphaTauri, on the sort of as Jake describes in his feature, the sort of like Venetian blind, toothy approach to the barge boards. It just doesn't look particularly wonderful, but maybe that's because the Williams of 10 years ago didn't have those things. Maybe if they did, it would have looked the same. So yeah, it's a good comparison. But yeah, just less of a fan of it on this car for some reason.
Jake, what were your takes on the livery? Are you a fan? Because I feel like we've got a bit of a mixture going on here on this panel.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely a fan. I do like a blue livery a lot. I do particularly like dark liveries. I think, favourite all-time livery, if I have to say, would be the 1998 Arrows. It was just resplendent in just pitch black livery, and it stood out. And it's good for, although Alex says, it's not going to show up great on TV, it's good for the sponsors because you can see it very, very clearly. There's that very clear contrast, if you like. So yeah, I'm a fan of it.
Okay, and then I guess what we should probably do is look ahead to their season and what we think the AlphaTauri team can achieve. Because obviously they had a pretty good season last season. They have a Grand Prix winner in their midst now in the form of Pierre Gasly. But what we did was we asked some of the fans on social media what they thought of the chances of AlphaTauri this upcoming season. And obviously one of the key differences is that they now have Yuki Tsunoda joining the team, making his debut. So when we asked the fans what they thought about that partnership, a lot of people are on side for it. They think it's going to be a partnership made in heaven. Do you think they're going to be good for one another in that team?
I think it's quite a good combination. I quite like the experience of Pierre's experience. He's a race winner. He's out to kind of prove a point and seal a future at AlphaTauri. I think he knows that the Red Bull chances in the future is so slim now that he needs to make a future of this, and it's a team that can move forward. See what his experience. And Yuki's arrived. He hasn't arrived on a huge wave of hype that we've seen with other rookies like Max Verstappen, for example. It's touch and go if he's going to get his super license. Right until the end, we weren't sure if Yuki would get the nod or not, but he has got it. And the more you hear from the team, you hear comments from Franz Tost, you hear from Jody Egginton, you hear from Graham Watson, just about how impressive Yuki is, about his abilities in high-speed corners, his strengths under braking, his attitude to learning. So I think it's going to be quite exciting. I think Yuki, no doubt, probably will make mistakes. Franz Tost said this morning he's expecting a few crashes from Yuki. But Franz likes this kind of learning process of rookies, that you can't find the limit without going over it sometimes. So while there may be some late nights in the AlphaTauri garage making some car repairs, actually I think by the end of the season, particularly the second half, should be some decent points rolling in.
And talking of points, it might come as no surprise that when we asked the fans which of the two are going to bring home more points, 91% were in favour of Pierre Gasly. Alex, would you predict the same?
Yeah, I think I would. I think, he comes in, it's another season where he's stayed at the same team, and he highlighted that last year as a particular thing that really benefited him. It was that it was the first time in his single-seater career that he'd actually stayed with the same team over an off-season. And yeah, I think, Tsunoda's got a tough job because there's very, very little 2021 testing in terms of in the new car. But AlphaTauri have given him, a good program in terms of old cars, getting him up to speed, a fair few runs at Imola and things like that. So, he should be well prepared for them. He's also, I think, got a very good temperament. I don't think we've heard anything really about any problems about his attitude or things like that. And I think it's going to be an interesting case. Has Red Bull promoted another driver too soon, or is he going to be someone that takes the Formula One really, really well? And there's every evidence that he will do that. I think if you look in terms of his wheel-to-wheel racing, there was the F2 race at Spa last year, the end, going up against Mazepin. I thought he performed very well there, came across very well in terms of that battle. And Gasly as well. Another year back at the team that obviously loves him, he loves them. They concentrate on giving their drivers a car that's got sort of a wide operating range so that they can excel in different conditions and at different tracks. Didn't always work last year. We saw that at Turkey. Things sort of didn't really come together for them in the wets. So yeah, they've got every chance of being really, really successful, and I would expect Gasly to lead the way.
Now, when we asked whether or not the team were going to score more points than in 2020, it was unanimous. Everybody thought that the team will score more points this season, but Twitter and Instagram were split on whether they would get a better constructors result overall. So it was quite close on Twitter. 56% don't think they're going to score higher than they did last year. On Instagram, 66% think they will. Where are we going to side on that split, Jake? Where do you think are they going to do any better than last season, or is the midfield just too tight?
I think it's very dependent on who drops the ball with the new rules and who doesn't. The noise is coming out of AlphaTauri. If you read some of the interviews, they should be where they are, well, performance-wise, where they've been the last couple of years. And if they can bridge that gap, because they were just on the sort of periphery of that battle for third, just not quite close enough to be able to do it. But if they can find a little bit more performance, and an Aston Martin or a Ferrari or a Renault or a Alpine, or a McLaren can't, then they can scoot up to 6th, maybe even 5th if they've got the legs on them. So I think it is dependent on a few other teams. The team itself should have enough about it to just continue on that progress. So again, another Fence City answer, but yeah, go on then. Let's call it a 6th place and see what happens.
And obviously last season they had the absolutely wonderful moment of Pierre Gasly winning the Italian Grand Prix. Now, I don't think I'm going to forget that race in a hurry, and it's always going to be one of those standout moments where, it was just so unpredictable and such a crazy race. But do we reckon they're going to have the same form of luck this season? We asked, will we see them return to the top step in 2021? Again, Twitter seemed more decided. 81% said absolutely not. But Instagram, only 67% said absolutely not. What are their chances? Do we think that this season could give us just as much unpredictability as last season, John?
I think it's going to be tougher this season for anyone outside the top teams to get a shoe in at a win. You've got to take into the account that Red Bull's got Sergio Perez now, so should be a 4th car up there mixing it about, because Red Bull's problem last year was if Max Verstappen was out, basically, then Albon wasn't really in a position to capitalise. So on the afternoons where Max isn't there, which happened in Italy an awful lot last year, you'd expect Perez to pick up the pieces rather than someone else outside. I think also McLaren's likely to make a step with a switch to Mercedes. So I think, while AlphaTauri can make some good progress with the car, I don't think it'll be dramatically different to last season. And I think that, the chances of the circumstances flicking around again to allow a Pierre or Yuki to get it there are quite slim.
Anybody else? What do we think?
Yeah,
Any chance at all, Alex?
I hate to agree with Twitter personally, but I don't see it as that it would be a case of assuming that they'd be any more successful than last year, or that Formula One would be any more random than it was last year. I think if you look at the races that Mercedes didn't win, they either made massive errors in it, or Red Bull simply beat them. That's what happened at Silverstone and what happened at Abu Dhabi. Although I think that Mercedes probably underperformed at Abu Dhabi for various reasons, with the tyres and a little bit with the engines and things like that, and also the fact that no one can overtake at Abu Dhabi. So yeah, I don't think obviously no one has a crystal ball, but it's boring. You can't just say, oh well, I'm sure things will just work out. Whatever, we've got to make these predictions, but you just got to go with what feels logical and what feels right. And I just don't see an automatic assumption that AlphaTauri can repeat its win. I mean, even if you look at that Monza race, they needed a massive bit of luck to win it, and I'm not just talking about Hamilton and Mercedes not noticing the pit lane was closed. Like Carlos Sainz Jr. was the second best driver in that race after Lewis Hamilton in terms of on pure speed before it happened. So they needed a lot of things to come together. And again, in terms of the getting more points than last year, you've got to factor in Ferrari. Will it be able to climb back up? It's got a new engine. If you put a 2019 performance level engine in that car last year, you've got to think it would be a lot more successful. So yeah, sorry to be down and pessimistic and miserable, but there we go. They can take their underwhelming livery and hopefully do their best with it. Sorry.
Has the early morning start got to you?
Yeah, it's too early. Not acceptable. I prefer the 7 p.m. launch. I did like the length of it though. Although I don't understand why they put the fashion show after the car. I was like, if you're selling something, put it first. Anyway.
But surely that was better for us, because then we got what we wanted and we could just leave.
Very true. But in a 3-minute video, I was happy to stay to the end.
Fair enough. And I think Jake, you had a comment to make on Yuki's jumper.
Yeah, I just was going to say that I quite like it, and as soon as AlphaTauri releases its autumn-winter catalogue, I shall be buying one, unless they want to send me one. And
I was going to say, you're going to do a plug for some freebies.
Yeah, I was going to say, so AlphaTauri, if you're listening, pop me a jumper and we'll talk.
We see you're wearing a nice jumper at the moment, actually, Jake.
Oh, thank you very much, John.
I'm just intrigued to know your jumper budget, JBL, because I'm pretty sure AlphaTauri, everything they sell is extraordinarily expensive.
You can treat yourself a couple times a year, why not?
I probably should, to be honest.
He's an influencer, right? We can get it through on that basis. You influence people, don't you, Jake?
Not in a good way, but yeah, sure, why not?
Okay, well, okay, just to wrap up then, what are we going to give? Are we going to give the AlphaTauri a thumbs up for today, or a need to do better? John?
I think it's a good start, but I'm not expecting it to be a dramatically different season.
Alex?
Yeah, I don't want to be horrible. I didn't particularly like the livery, but I think thumbs up in terms of everything they produced and everything been very slick, and they're a likeable team, and all the best to them.
And Jake?
Yeah, no, thumbs up from me. I like the livery. And I think they'll do well this year. They've got an exciting driver pairing, so all looks good for them.
Yeah, I think I'm going to join. I think we're unanimously saying well done AlphaTauri for today, but that's what we think. What do you guys think at home as well? Let us know in the comments. And tweet us if you want, at Autosport. We always love to hear your thoughts and opinions on the cars and on our videos. So let us know what you think, and until next time, we'll see you then.